have all heard the horror stories of slavery and asked ourselves, how could people allow something so terrible to happen? In grade school, I'm sure many of you, like myself, learned a little bit about slavery, and I've studied a lot about it this semester. It took many years and many people to finally abolish the slave trade, and I want to tell you about three very different people from three very different lifestyles who had a monumental effect on the abolition of the slave trade. One of which being Olaudah Equiano. He gave a face to slavery through his writings. He was sold into slavery at 11 years old. He was eventually able to buy his freedom, and he became an author. In an excerpt from Equiano's The Middle Passage, he gives us an idea of what it was like to be on a slave ship. He describes the air quality, that it was so bad that it made a lot of the slaves sick. It made many of the slaves die, and he says the stench was only made worse by the chains and the screaming women. We learned a lot about the life of a slave from Equiano. John Newton gives us a view from the other side, the side of a slave trader. In 1750, John Newton went on his first voyage as the captain of a slave trade ship. He looked back later and he described himself as a ruthless businessman and callous observer of the Africans that he traded. 1754, he traded a life at sea for a life of priesthood, and he began to feel a lot of remorse and guilt over the sins that he had committed as a slave trader. And so he put those feelings onto paper, and he wrote many pieces of literature, one of which is Amazing Grace. John Newton's impact on the abolition of the slave trade comes from his influence on William Wilberforce, who is perhaps the most influential person on the abolition of the slave trade. After William Wilberforce joined Parliament, he underwent this really intense conversion to Christianity, and he went to John Newton because he wanted to leave politics and pursue a career, like a religious career. And John Newton told him to stay in Parliament and serve God where he was. So William Wilberforce did. He fought tirelessly against the slave trade, and March 25th, 1807, slavery was abolished in the British colonies, but not as a whole. So he continued to fight despite his failing health. July 26th, 1833, slavery was abolished, done. And just 3 days later, William Wilberforce died. So Equiano gave a face to slavery. John Newton was the author of many hymns, and he was a slave ship captain. William Wilberforce was a passionate politician with a cause. And I just think it's incredible that such different men had such an effect on the slave trade abolition. So how could something so horrendous happen? We're fallen people who are consumed with our own success and our greed, but in the midst of all this immorality, hope shows its face through John Newton, William Wilberforce, and Olaudah Equiano.